Hello, everyone. Welcome. Oustanding. My name is Neil Silcox. I am the Faculty Excellence Lead with the Maple League of Universities, and I'm really excited to be joining you today for Innovative Engagement, 21st Century Lecturing Tools and Strategies. I'm joining you from Chibuktuk, Halifax, which is in Mi'kma'ki, unceded territory. And we have people joining us from all across Turtle Island. So if you'd like to take a moment and drop where you're joining from in the chat, we would love to hear it. I'm really excited for our guests today, Donna Trubinsky and Russell Wyeth. You're here to talk about, innovative engagement. This started as a conversation about gamification, which has a whole sort of weight to it. But I think it's just about really cool new ways to connect with students. And they come from two very different fields. Donna is in history, Russell is in biology. And we're going to hear about some of the tensions that come with there. And I'm really excited for what I think is a kind of a messy conversation that we're all in the middle of, and two really smart people to talk about that messiness. So with that being said, Donna, Russell, I'll invite you to turn your cameras on and to unmute. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Russell and I had a discussion yesterday, and I think I'm going to start, if that's okay. Still okay, Russell?
Go for it.
Okay, awesome. Neil said yesterday in our kind of pre-meeting that it was okay if this was messy, which is good because it is messy. I'm going to try and share my screen, but I haven't had, even though I'm talking about technological innovation, I have not been particularly successful at kind of doing this sort of thing. So let me share my screen. So starting off messy, and I'm actually going to talk about gamification in general terms and kind of introduce you to the platform I use, which is called Gradecraft, which is out of the University of Michigan. It's the best thing I've found to do what I want to do in class, but I'm going to start by backing up and get a bit and talking about gamification and how I came to gamification. And one of my irritations that I'm dealing with now as I try and implement some of the pedagogy around gamification. So I hope you'll bear with me. So I'm going to start with an anecdote about a conversation I had earlier this week with a research student of mine who I kind of got out of the room to pick up some photocopying. And when I got back, the student was saying to another student, "I hate it when professors don't care about you." And like, naturally, I said, "What's that about?" And the student replied that a professor in one of their classes that they'd just been talking to didn't give marks above 80. I'll preface this by saying the student is a humanist, while I'm not sure that it's true that the professor doesn't care about the student, in fact, I think that's probably not true. I understand the student's frustration about the idea that they can't achieve more than 80 in the class. And I think this is a problem in the humanities in general, specific to the humanities, that we say we grade on a scale from 0 to 100, but really we don't. We grade on a scale from about 0 to about 85. And one of the reasons I turned to gamification was partially to deal with that. Gamification, the way I want to practice it at least, challenges the idea that you should only grade up to 85. It reminds us that students are learning skills and content and should be given ample opportunities to learn and master these, and that when they do master a skill or a piece of content, they should be rewarding with potentially a perfect grade. That is, we should be trying, and I don't think this group is actually doing this, but we should not be gatekeeping so much as trying to facilitate learning. I'm pretty sure most people who are participating in this particular workshop have an idea what gamification is. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the principles of gamification. That is how you bring gameful elements into your courses. And I don't have a ton of time to do that today, but I'm going to just do a few things, talk about a few things that I do. Okay, hopefully you can see that slide that says principles of gamification. So some of the principles of gamification that these are the basic principles of gamification. First of all, you give out points, not grades. Of course, in our modern system, in a university, those points have to somehow be able to be translated into a grade at the end that makes sense to the university system. But you start with 0 points and you gain points as a student as you acquire skills and knowledge. I like that for a few reasons. The first is that it flips the traditional way students think about grades, that they start with 100 and lose points as they get things wrong. As you start with 0, and as you show that you're acquiring skills and knowledge, you actually earn points up to a particular level. We've talked a lot in this group about student choice and autonomy, Gradecraft and gamification. Absolutely student choice is a principle of gamification. Typically in a gamified class, if you're totally gamifying the course, you have assignments and tests, and it can be all kinds of different things, but typically you have assignments that equal about 150% of what is required to get an A. So that gives the students ample opportunity to choose assignments that they'd like to do to get the grade they want to get. Linked to that is the freedom to fail. Having more assignments that students are able to attempt allows students to try something they might otherwise not try, to think outside the box, to be creative, to try and do something they might not be comfortable doing, because failure doesn't mean failure in the class. It means failure, but a chance to be able to make up them points in other ways. So you can do that by offering multiple assignments, and you can also do that by allowing students to hand in assignments for regrading once they address the feedback they receive. I don't think that constant, clear feedback is a principle only used in gamification. I think all good teaching has that, but constant feedback throughout the course as they do the different assignments is really important. And a main way that I do that with Gradecraft is through really clear rubrics. So if a student meets all the requirements of a particular rubric to get a particular part of the rubric to get 100% on the section on grammar, say, they actually do get 100% on that. So the rubrics are clear, but the rubrics also allow for that full grading range. So I said at the beginning, I use Gradecraft, which is a system or platform out of the University of Michigan. I want to show you the best tool for that. This is the single most powerful tool, I think, in Gradecraft, and it is the grade predictor. So what's wonderful about this is students can choose what they're likely to get in every single engagement in the course. You know, say you're going to do 3 out of 5. I hope you can see me moving things and toggling things. Maybe one day you're going to be really engaged and get 5 out of 5 for engagements, or 500 out of 500. You have to write the midterms. So say I'm not going to do so well on that because I know I have 3 other midterms. I can guesstimate what I'm going to get. I'm going to write the historical documentary analysis, but I'm not going to do the material culture assignment. So it gives students a lot of power to visually see the choices they make about the assignments they're going to do, and they can add up all of those things all of the marks they're likely to get to the level they want to achieve in the course. So if they only want to achieve a C, they can maybe do 50,000 points rather than 70,000 points. And as students receive feedback on all of their assignments, the platform actually inputs what they get on individual assignments, so they can always see what they've done compared to what they need to do to get the mark they want. Students are afraid of it at first, and it takes some time to get them comfortable with it. But once they get comfortable with it, it's wonderful because they always know how they're doing. They always know what they need to do to adjust. There's no mystery. They always know what they're doing. So this piece right here is the single most powerful tool, I think, on Gradecraft. There's other really cool stuff, but that's the exciting thing. Okay, I'm going to go back and share my PowerPoint again. All right, so this is gamification. This is what a typical gamification level chart looks like. So this is from my first year course from a couple of years ago, and it basically shows you if you achieve 70,000 points before the final exam, you'll enter with a perfect grade going into the final exam. Now, true gamification, which I would love to do, but I'm constrained from doing by my administration, would include the final exam and the gamification. And that is if students showed their skill acquisition in other ways and did poorly on the exam, it wouldn't necessarily matter because you'd already have those points built up. But this is a compromise with my administration, who doesn't like it when I gamify totally, because the engagement's so great that students do too well. They break the sort of bell curve and the X average. And so this is how I gamify now. I allow students to earn up to perfect, up to 70% of the class gamified, and that's what this looks like. So students work through their points as they go forward. And we can talk a little bit about that. That's one of the things I'm kind of working with around gamification now. This is a typical syllabus, which the Learning Together we had a couple of weeks ago makes me realize this syllabus is a wall of text, and I should address that. But what I want you guys to see here is that there's lots of choice. There are some required assignments like the midterms and final exams, which are required by our Senate rules. But the students have a lot of choice of what they can do. Required assignments are in bold and non-required assignments are not. There are a series of team assignments that you can do individually or as part of a team. I really encourage students to work in teams though, because I think the humanities generally isn't doing a great job of teaching students how to work in teams, which they often do in their work lives. And the other thing I'll say here is that there's a lot of points available here, right? There's way more than 100% or 70,000 points available for students to do here. And that's part of gamification, giving students choice and the freedom to fail again. I won't talk at length about these. These are sort of gathered from scholarly literature and also my own observations of what happens in gamified courses that I do. Student engagement increases, class attendance increases, student engagement outside the class increases, students come prepared, they've done the reading because there's marks attached or points attached to the reading. There's increased assignment completion because some students really want to achieve every point they can achieve. So that's all in the scholarly literature. It's been divided, but it's heading towards increased engagement with gamification. Better academic outcomes is a little more difficult to measure, but since 2017, there's been quite a lot of literature that suggests there's also better academic outcomes. And it makes sense, I think engagement tends to mean better academic outcomes. This is from a really famous study of pre-service teachers in a course that was gamified, that was published, as you can see, in 2013. I just want to point out that, so to get an A, you had to get 2000 XP, but most of the students went far beyond achieving an A. And in fact, some students broke broke the mold, broke the cap, and actually went far beyond what they needed for an A+. And when I gamified my entire course, this is absolutely what I saw. When students know they can achieve 100 or more than 100, they will try and reach for it. And that was absolutely my own experience as well. It's less clear when they gamify up to 70%, because they know there's that other piece there. But certainly gamification does seem to increase engagement. This is the last piece. I'll end with this slide. This is my own research based on surveys I give my gamified classes. And as you can see here, this is over the course of 3 years now I've done these surveys. So this is the aggregate numbers. 60% of students said that the gamified course increased their engagement more or quite a bit more than they would have in a non-gamified class. And then another 33% said that the gamified course resulted in about the same engagement as a non-gamified course. And I think that 33% is probably your self-starters, those people that do well in university anyway. And then the other 7% we have to talk about. I haven't quite figured out why there's 7% that aren't as engaged, or and what we can do about that. But I think these numbers, which are over time, do suggest that gamification does have an enormous ability to increase student engagement and student outcomes. And thanks, I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And now, Russell, if you'd like to come on, we'll be excited to hear from you and what your experience is.
Okay. Thanks, Donna. That was great. Lots of cool ideas, as we've talked about before. I'm going to share my screen. So I think this is going to end up going fairly quickly, but hopefully the basic point is straightforward. So what I'm going to be talking about is low stakes incentivization in, I guess, quote, regular classes, not gamified classes. And this is something that I often bring up when I talk to other people about the difficulties we have getting students to do what they ought to. Those extra bits on the side that would help them out so much, but that we don't necessarily want to be strictly part of our classes. Another way to look at this is I'm an invertebrate zoologist, so that means I really love creepy, crawly, slimy things on the ocean shore. And believe me, getting engagement in this classroom is no problem. But in a lecture, it can be quite different. So that's what I'm focused on. I need to acknowledge some really important influences in a lot of my thinking here, because I don't really have a lot of formal pedagogical training. I've just sort of soaked things up along the way. So Marjorie Wanham, Christina Holmes on the beach, bottom right there, and Jenny Hoffman kissing the cows. So they all influenced through many conversations, what I'm sharing here. So incentivizing engagement is what I'm talking about. And so I'm going to focus on the two words. Incentivization, what do I mean? This is 4 to 8% of a course grade total. So usually you'd think about this as a participation grade. I like to call it an engagement grade just because I like the name better. What I do is I divide it among many small activities. And the one common feature of those small activities is that they're non-graded, or there might be correct or incorrect answers. I'm in science, and so there's some information checking that goes on. But crucially, the students can have unlimited attempts. And so theoretically, just through trial and error, they can get it correct. And so then get full marks. And what am I engaging? Well, like I said, it's getting students to do the things they ought to. Ask questions in class, practice key material outside of class, connect course material to the real world, prepare for and debrief after exams. So I think I've got 4 quick examples here of what I'm talking about. This first one is the most complicated one, but it's the one that I love the most because it just layers in so much great stuff. So I teach, or have taught in the past, a first-year diversity of life class, which is teaching one of the drier parts of biology, which is taxonomy, the classification of organisms. And you can see this long list of names here. And of course, that's fairly dry to just hand over along with a set of characteristics. So what I do is I get students to do a weekly encounter with the diversity. So they encounter something in their real life. Okay, say it's a tree, a conifer tree, then that's a gymnosperm, selection F there. And then they describe their encounter. They submit this through Moodle, our learning management system. Okay, and I'm emphasize here, there is no checking of this. They just submit it, they do the classification themselves. And if they in this process, they are practicing what I'm trying to teach them. Okay, and I also get them bring their encounters back to class. So when I'm talking about, in this case, prokaryotes, which are bacteria and some other small things, I will present encounters back. And I, of course, cherry pick useful ones for my nefarious purposes. So in this case, the very first one is someone who's tried to cheat the system and submitted that they encountered a spider, which is absolutely not a prokaryote. And so they are starting to think that I am reading all 10 of these that they submit over the term, and there can be up to 300 students in the class. That's 3,000 submissions. And of course, I'm not, but they start to think so. And so that then promotes them actually doing this. And then when they're actually doing it, I can do a lot of good teaching reinforcement. So you can notice the green and red, except for the colorblind. I'm sorry, I should have pointed that out. So this bacteria word is green, that one's red, mold, and these are green down here. These are me doing teaching moments with the students about spelling, about conventions with capitalization, all this boring nitty-gritty stuff that scientists care about, but it turns it into a fun way to deal with it because I'm also telling the students' own stories back to them. And so I see this as generating and engaging the students with a key learning outcome of the course outside of the class. That's great. They're practicing their technical terminology, which of course is important both in first year, but well beyond if they stick in biology. It's increasing in class the atmosphere of individual participation. I get to highlight common errors in a non-judgmental way. This is all anonymous, right, when I bring it back to class. And on both sides, we're telling fun stories. So get really high participation rates in this. Here's another simple example, and this is just a straight up information check. You've done a lecture on ecology. You're double checking that they've understood what some of our classification of different components of food webs are: primary producers, primary consumers, etc. And this is a case where there is a correct answer here, and the students can do the quiz as often as they want until they get perfect. Okay. And in the process, they're practicing, and even if they're doing it just by trial and error, it is a moment of reinforcement. Right, so I need to switch to Moodle for this one. I don't just do information transfer. We all know that it's really valuable for students to review and debrief after having a midterm, especially if it hasn't gone quite as much as they hope to. And so I give students engagement points if they do that. So this is a quiz in Moodle. It's not really a quiz. Every answer is correct. Okay, but I'm asking for the long answer question, did you receive full marks? Or if you didn't, why didn't you? Was it exam skills? Was it study skills? Was it both? And then for multiple choice, or in this case, clicker questions, was it study skills, okay, or exam skills that were the problem? And then how they were managing their time. And I did the check. I think it was like 70 to 80% of the class submitted this back to me. And I doubt you could get a better response rate in first year students doing this level of analysis of their own work. And they were getting this, they did it because I gave them a small engagement grade for it. So that's that one example. Now I'll flip back here. Oh, there we go. So in this large class situation, I take this 4% total engagement grade. As I said, 100% is always possible. They can do unlimited tenths of anything that's graded, or it's just a submission only. I divide that 4% among about 30 different activities, so 0.1% each approximately. There's just 15 sort of topic quizzes, 10 encounters with diversity, and then 5 of those doing something useful that they ought to options. And this is the correlation between how much they do on engagement activities here on this axis against the final grade in the course. Okay, and this is for those that pay attention to these sorts of data. That's an incredible correlation, and of course, I can't tell you which way it goes. Like those that do final grades, get good final grades, are going to be doing really good in engagement, or really good engagement leads to final grades. It's probably both, but they do this. Okay, so right, upper level classes where things are a little smaller. This is from an animal behavior class. This student, I have permission to share Bridget's stuff. She just last week or 2 weeks ago now, saw a snowy egret, she thought, at a local site. And like a good biologist, she's providing some basic data about where she saw it and what she thought it was. And then this is the key part of this entire course. If they take one thing from my course, I want them to be able to explain how the behavior is produced. That's the proximate cause. And then the ultimate cause is why it evolved. And this is pure speculation. But getting a student to do that is doing exactly what biologists do. And that's my goal here. And she was lucky enough to also get a photo of it while she was there. So that's the case there. Again, all that happened, oops, I shouldn't switch yet. Sorry, there we go. Where am I going? There. The key is all that happens here is the bottom is I give this a rating. And so as long as she's done a decent job of speculation, she gets the points. And there's no real right or wrong. If she makes a mistake, I coach. Sometimes I coach by replying here in the forum where all students can see it. Other times I'll reply directly to. It usually depends on whether I get a feel for the student and are they uncertain about something and they may not want the public correction. Alternately, if it's a great teaching moment, it goes public, okay? Because they know these are public postings. Okay, now we go back here. Last couple examples. This was something we did in our, we have a departmental seminar series, and I suspect many people are familiar with someone important. You invite someone and they do this great talk and then no students ask questions. And we were finding that that occurred in our departmental seminar series. And I just added a quota. I said, you've all got to do it by the end of term, with this many speakers, you're all attending 80% of these. By the end of term, you've got to ask 2 questions. And the atmosphere completely changed. It took us literally 2 seminars to nail down that we can't allow faculty to ask questions at the same time that students. We have to give them that permission time slot. I now regularly get seminar speakers telling us that our students are so engaged. They come out and then, you get that feeling that someone has liked your talk because you got all these questions, and literally we'll get 3 or 4 undergraduates asking questions immediately after a research seminar. And simply because we told them they had to get this engagement quota met. Okay, you can also do this in your own class. I have this invertebrate zoology class. It's a really fun class to teach, and normally I have no problems getting a lively lecture. And one year, it was brutal, pulling teeth. And I thought it was something I was doing. But after the midterm, I told them, look, this is not working the way it's supposed to. This lecture is not the environment that's going to produce the best learning for everyone. So I'm going to make you guys ask questions. And I came up with this idea of great questions. Great questions are questions that are about something for which the answer is not something I would have taught. Okay, so it goes beyond what I was intending to teach. Okay, and of course, a great answer to that is then the students going off and finding out some relevant information to an answer. But the answer may or may not be available, but they're going to provide some sort of scholarly source, a partial answer, or just what would be needed to get the answer if no one's done it before. Okay, and this double thing builds all sorts of wonderfulness. I can't shut them up in class. The students report on their feedback that it permits them to engage. My course evaluation ratings on whether or not the students feel open to ask questions skyrocketed. They were good to start with, but they just, it's crazy, right? I'm making them do it. But apparently in this generation's brain, what it means is that they have permission to do it by making them do it. And of course, by adding in this layering of the answer stuff, then it promotes synthetic thinking because they're going beyond the course, formulating answers, doing a very quick scholarly source search and sift. I don't want them spending a lot of time on this, half-hour max, that kind of thing. And it's produced, and it worked so well that one year. And I got that feedback at the end of that one course where I only did it half for half, that I've just done it in every upper level class since. And it's fantastic. So, and with that, we still have plenty of time to talk about this as a group. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Russell. Thank you, Donna. Oh boy, what an exciting pair of presentations. I would love to open the floor for some questions, or if you'd like to share something that you've tried. And both Donna and Russell really said we were really hoping to have a great conversation as well. And I think that this is, as we said, a messy place. So conversations are terrific. Please, if you don't feel like turning your camera on, you can raise your hand virtually. You can type it out in the chat, and I'll try and moderate the questions from the chat. I will maybe get us started as people are typing away, I hope. You talked about that you gave the impression, Russell, that you were reading all 3,000 of these posts, but that really you weren't. Can you talk about how you managed to get enough data out in order to have them thinking that you're always there, without having to just be up till midnight every day?
I can see I have a past students in the audience here, so
oh,
maybe we should
no.
ask her. I mean, I don't work too hard at it. It's just, I mean, I still don't quite understand. I mean, I meant it. The percentages per activity here are so low. The cost benefit would often say don't bother, right? But I do emphasize that at the start. I guess that's what I do. I emphasize at the start that if they do all of them, they get 4 to 8% of the course, depending which course it is, quote, free. And I'll use that language, even though I know in incentivizing them to do all this stuff, it's not free. They're putting effort in and they're getting something back. But I've set up that view of it. And I do have, especially with the first years, I do come across quite strongly at the start about being fairly strict about certain things. It's a pre-managed thing that works well in the large class, at least for me. And so I think that also may factor in. And of course, every year when I do this first one, the prokaryotes one, I make sure I find someone who's clearly found something, tried to quote cheat. I mean, they haven't really cheated because it's not, but I do that, and that's enough, I think. And I mean, I don't know. Maybe they do the realization that I'm not really paying attention to. I'm not able to pay attention to them all. Not sure. Right.
Super. Are there any questions from our illustrious audience? Matthew.
Thank you. Russell, Donna, that was wonderful. It was nice to get a little insight into your classes. My question's for Donna, because Russell, you sort of touched in Neil's question did. How do you find, Donna, the marking load? You mentioned having very clear rubrics, but I know that always is the thing that puts many faculty off adding more and more assignments or doing this gamification, is that extra labor on this side. So just wondering how you balance it, or if you do, or tips.
So I don't have 300-person classes like Russell does. So my largest class is about 50. And my average, I might teach 100 students to 110 students in a semester. So that makes my life slightly easier than Russell's would be. It is a huge amount of marking, I will admit. And I offer remarking on every assignment. And I also, I mark up the essay and then I do a rubric besides. So every essay takes me, I aim for a half an hour, but realistically it's 45 minutes. And if it's, the C's are the ones that take the most time, right? Because you want to give them substantive feedback. But anyway, so yes, I would say it's a lot of marking. I thought initially when I offered regrading for everything that I would have lots of students taking me up on it, but I actually don't. Most students accept and move on to the next assignment. Where I get where people will remark is if they're in the 50s or if they're in the 80s and want to do even better. So those ones are fairly straightforward to remark. It is a lot, but when I decided to do this, I kind of committed to it, and I'm lucky enough to have a low enough teaching load that I think it's feasible.
Wonderful, thank you, Donna.
It's a great question, Matthew. Andrew, I see your hand. Would you like to share?
I don't know if I want to share, maybe wonder out loud might be more what I'm doing, because there were certain things that I was taking some notes, just reminding me here of these that really resonated. You know, one was the idea of free points. And, you know, my experience with that is that kind of varies, but I've actually even asked classes, why aren't you taking these? You know, so you know, because courses will vary in levels of engagement for reasons that I've always assumed, you know, exist beyond the class, depending on its size, right? It could be a particular cohort, it could be a group having personal problems or things like that, as we've been through, but without trying to like do the finger wagging thing, right? Which is, you know, sort of the I guess that's one of my wonderings, right? Is that, yeah, because I have sort of free points, as you said, they're not free, but you know, that here's some low-hanging fruit. And when I was a long time ago, when I was a student, I quickly recognized, gee, there's that low-hanging fruit there, and that kind of saves me maybe at the end of the class. And then the other thing that Donna mentioned that I found really interesting, and I wondered if people had further thoughts or follow-ups on, was the idea that you gain points. And that's something that I've been explaining, because it was a sort of an issue, a trial and error thing, where students would come and say, I don't understand where I've lost points. And I would say, well, you didn't, right? What you didn't do is you didn't gain the number of points that you thought you had gained, and you gained them by 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Or whatever it might actually be. And sometimes that gets across and people walk away and go, yeah, okay, I get this now. And then other times there remains some confusion. So on both of those things, I was wondering if there are any further comments you guys have.
I can say the platform that I use, Andrew, is really good at laying it out. Like, everybody starts at not even on the board yet. And so, you know, as we go through assignments, and I didn't get to talk about Gradecraft a whole lot, but the assignments are on Gradecraft and the rubrics are on Gradecraft. So they can actually see them getting marks on the rubrics, and then where they are in terms of their progress through the ranks. And so I have to say, Gradecraft has been really, really great about demonstrating you start with 0. And it's a game changer, right? Because suddenly they're striving for more rather than worrying about what they've lost.
Couple thoughts on my side of things. The gaining points, I do wonder if there's a possibility. I extensively use the Moodle gradebook. So it is live updated constantly. And so I suspect that may create a bit more of a perception of grades gained, simply because there's lots of stuff that hasn't happened yet, and you're seeing things accrue, including the participation marks. On the flip side, I don't know how much students actually use the individual aspects of the gradebook other than to look up a certain thing, because it is so complicated. And then as for the stuff being free and trying to really get them to engage with stuff that is free, I definitely straight up at the front talk about that 4%. I would never go less than 4%. That 4% is the difference between a fail and a pass. It's the difference between a scholarship and a not scholarship, that sort of thing in their head, right? That can easily get them from below 80 to above 80. So I would never go below 4%.
as you see other people, their hands up. Is there an upper level that you would go to?
Well, that's of course. Then the flip side is that what this does allow is because I have a course weighting system where there is no requirement to pass the final or the midterm or anything like that, which does happen in some science classes. Students can get 40% on the midterm and like 47% on the final and still pass my class.
Yeah.
And so it's the cringe that is the upper limit, right? Like how now the other and the other flip side of this situation, and this is not would this would actually affect my decisions, but it's kind of a huge useful benefit. You do get grade challenges, and grade challenges in my courses are so easy to deal with. It's like if you failed and you didn't take advantage of the 4% quote free, done, denied, right? It's just, that's the way it goes. So, but again, it's the 4% and talking to them about it is quote free, and it's doing things you ought to do anyways. And so and as in the first year class, I do talk a lot, and this is a really hard one to walk the line on, but they have so much to learn about being a good university student, and a bunch of the stuff that I'm getting them to do is what a good university student to do. So I do a lot of teaching of that. Like it's a parallel learning outcome of my first year course is just how to be a good student. And that runs through all of the course in all sorts of different ways. And so that just folds in, I guess.
Terrific.
But anyways, back upper limit, I'll go as high as last year I went as high as 8% during the pandemic. Okay, but that was for upper level classes. I think I probably would not do that with the first years.
Thanks, Andrew, for a great question. I want to read a couple of comments coming from students in the chat. Emily, who I think was in your class, Russell, said, I remember all of these from taking your diversity of life class in my first year. It helped me understand how I learned and studied best, which is, I think, a really great testament. So bravo. And Eli shares, as a first generation learner who is neurodivergent, I absolutely love these things. While my ADHD brain may enjoy more creative aspects, it also needs structure. I think these things are great at hitting both structure and creativity for the win. I very much relate to the have to equaling permission sentiment as a first generation student who doesn't yet know the rules. So that's very, very telling. Thank you both for sharing your viewpoints. Tony, I see you next, and then Janita, or perhaps I'm mispronouncing that. We'll get to you next. Tony, do you have a thought or question?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to echo a couple of things. One had to do with Andrew's question about student perception of, you start from 100 and you lose. I hear that all the time. In fact, I just heard it again yesterday. And I had to say to the students, no, this is not you. You have to change your understanding of this. And Donna, I really am interested in the Gradecraft. It's something that I've looked at recently and wasn't familiar with it. And the gamification component of it, because I already do similar things. It's just the fact that now there's a tool that will do it for me.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, it makes it a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I had not considered, Russell, what you do in terms of I'm going to call it a survey or the quiz or what have you. That's a great idea. What I have done in the past, which is kind of like a version of that, is the first day of classes, I get the students to think about what works best for their learning, what are barriers to their learning, and then something a prof has done in the past that has been great for their learning, and something a prof that's done in the past that has been a problem or a barrier to their learning. But that's that's not specific enough in a sense. I mean, it gets us having good conversations, and then we can structure the course to avoid certain problems or to encourage certain things. But I love what you're doing in terms of giving them that kind of, it's fantastic. Now I want to steal it.
There's no stealing here.
Okay.
I wanted, So I do introduce yourself one, and really one that's definitely shared around here at StFX is tell me something important about yourself. Okay, and I tend to add that in particular that might affect the way this course goes for you or something like that. And of course, those are great things for them to share, but I actually pay them back for that's in the engagement grades list of things they do that. The other one thing that I do is you may have noticed that my websites get fairly extensive in the flicking that I was doing there. And so I have a website exploration as the very first engagement quiz. So they got to go find stuff all through the website. So they got to do a scavenger hunt. And that was pure defense. I do all this setup. It is, Moodle is constrained in how you can structure things. It's fairly, it's reasonably organized. And yet I would get a ton of questions about where stuff was. And so the first thing on that quiz is, where's the FAQ about the website? So that I can manage my interactions with them, because this is very much driven by the large class situation where you want to keep yourself interacting positively, not just hiding frustration when you're interacting with them. So.
Yeah.
That's very wise. Thank you.
And it's Yantina.
Yantina. Oh, thank you very much, Russell. Yantina, pardon me for I got a new computer and the screen is all very tiny. I don't know how to change the font.
No worries. It's not an intuitive name. Thank you both for your talks. My question is mostly for Donna. So when I think about gamification, one of the things I've also seen is leaderboards. I've been thinking about this a little bit because I use an in-class engagement system that has a built-in leaderboard. I haven't chosen to add it, but I'm wondering if you have any experience with that and whether it's something to use or avoid. Is there a best practice around that, or your just own personal opinion?
Yeah, so I actually don't know best practice. When I decided on leaderboards, I thought about how I would feel, which is perhaps certainly not the best way forward. But I actually don't activate my leaderboards. So what my students see is who has the highest mark they don't see who has it. They see what the highest achieved grade so far is, and that's all they see. Partially because I don't want it to get competitive between students. I want every student kind of striving to the top. I know there's quite a bit of literature that says leaderboards are actually quite good at motivating people. I can send you some literature if you'd like, Yantina. I don't really have I don't use them because I don't particularly like them myself, which is, I know, it's not based in education or research. It's just, I don't like them.
But you're obviously getting good engagement without that, right?
Yeah, and I think having letting them see what the range of grades in the class is enough to get them kind of motivated. Yeah, or it appears to be anyway.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've got another bit of insight from a student. I'm so grateful to these students for sharing. Emma shares, as a student, hearing that you have or you deserve a 0 on the first day before I've had a chance to prove myself or do anything can be a little overwhelming and stressful. I can see how finding a more comfortable way to frame this gamification platform would help students understand a lot. Yeah, I think that's really valuable, Emma, and good feedback. And I think that if you hear it, if it's said the wrong way, it can feel very like you're not worth anything, And
you need to prove yourself to me.
Yeah, and this comes back, Donna, to this, this students will often say, this teacher doesn't care about me, which is a perfectly reasonable anxiety from any of us. I never have a job where I'm not I don't know if my boss likes me, but generally we like people, but I think that's a very reasonable anxiety, and especially, in the pressure cooker of a university system.
Completely.
Can you talk about ways that you help students to see the possibility in this building up from the bottom?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's actually, it's a really good point. And I can see, especially my good students tend to like not be very comfortable with this notion that you start with 0 and you build up. But like I said, the Gradecraft actually is really good at kind of laying it out. And I talk about it in terms of gaming, that, you know, you go through stages to get to the top. And also I sort of, you know, I say it's a way to be able for students to be able to show me what they've learned, and once they see the possibility of being able to get the marks they want to get, once they see the possibility of going into the exam with a perfect grade, they stop worrying about the 0 and start figuring out how to go through. But it is a good thought that hearing that. And I don't emphasize that they start with 0, but I do talk about how it isn't that you start with 100 and lose. It's that you gain skill through the course. And I think that flip is a really important one. So Emma, maybe you and I can have a chat about how another way to approach it. But I do find if students often come having, of course, gamed in some way or another, and if they see it as kind of a video game where they have to go through levels, they tend to understand it, I think. But maybe I'm wrong. So I don't get that feedback in my evals. So I hope I'm doing it somewhat right.
And I think it's I have ended up doing something similar, completely inadvertently, maybe. I have because of this engagement grade, and also this is a science class which doesn't have like a parallel lecture and lab. They're fully integrated, and so the sort of the weighting structure in the syllabus of all the different components, there's a lot of smaller chunks. And so one of the things I try to do always is justify my choices with students in advance to see the reasoning behind it. And so I will talk about the fact that this broken up syllabus, grade structure, means that any one thing, particularly the midterm, is not catastrophic. But the flip side is that if you get into a pattern of not bothering because things are small, that's when you crash and burn. And so and again, that's thinking about it now, that is creating it can be interpreted as you're earning bits and you're doing lots of bits to get to the end. I don't know. On the other part is I will that correlation between participation and the grades, I show that to the next year's class.
Yeah,
that is absolutely something I show them. This is why I'm doing this.
Yeah. Same with me.
Yeah.
Like my students see what students have achieved in previous years, and they start to see, like, I don't know about you, Russell, but because you have choice built into that, you're 4 to 8%, but the students are terrified about how much autonomy they have in this class. Yeah. But then as they go through it, they're like, oh, like I don't have to do something on the week I have 3 midterms, you know? And they start to realize that maybe there is some benefit. So by the time they do the survey at the end, they're quite on board with me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We're coming up to the hour. As Tony mentioned in the chat, we're going to be reading the book Ungrading next term as part of the Maple League Book Club. And I think that a lot of this is a conversation that's happening there. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us. Thank you, Donna and Russell, for a terrific session.